Flight tanks configured for flight.
T-minus 30. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5,
20.
4, 3, 2,
Flight tanks configured
1,
for flight.
15.
Stage 1 props nominal.
GC copies, will go.
Plus 47 seconds into flight. Falcon 9 performing nominally. We're currently throttling down the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage, preparing for the period of maximum dynamic pressure and going supersonic. Plus 47 seconds into flight. Falcon 9 performing nominally. We're currently throttling down the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage, preparing for the period of maximum dynamic pressure. Heard the call out, Falcon 9 is supersonic. We're throttling the Merlin 1D engines back up as we pass through the period of maximum dynamic pressure.
Maximum dynamic pressure. Falcon 9 is supersonic.
You heard the call out, Falcon 9 is supersonic. A minute and a half in the Merlin 1D looks good for Falcon 9. Pass through the period of maximum dynamic pressure.
Maximum dynamic pressure.
We're seeing the view from a ground camera, and obviously we're having a minute and a half in the flight. Trajectory looks good for Falcon 9. Continues to track downrange well. Power on the Merlin 1D engines looks good. Avionics power looks good. We're seeing the view from a ground camera, and obviously we're having chill call out. Indicates that we have opened the pre-valve. Falcon 9 continues to track down chill in the upper stage engine. Power on the Merlin 1D preparation for ignition. Good. Avionics power looks good. Now the sequence of events coming up at T plus 245. We will have main engine cutoff. We'll shut down the 9 Merlin engines. Back engine chill. The first stage will then separate. We have opened the pre-valve. The second stage engine to chill in. So those activities coming up in preparation for ignition. 20 seconds from now. Now the sequence of events coming up at T plus 245, we will have main engine cutoff. We'll shut down the 9 Merlin engines. The first stage will then separate, and we will light the second stage engine. So those activities coming up in just under 20 seconds from now. We're throttling down the engines in preparation for MECO.
Okay.
Throttling down the engines in preparation for MECO.
Okay.
We've had successful shutdown and separation. Second stage engine has lit. Major activity coming up in about 14 seconds is separation of the payload fairing.
And back ignition.
We have fairing separation confirmed. Second stage engine. You can see 3 of the Iridium next satellites of the set of 5. As I mentioned, the gray satellites mounted on top of that, but not visible from the camera.
Following a nominal trajectory.
3.5 minutes into flight. We have fairing separation confirmed. The power on the upper stage engine. You can see 3 of the Iridium next satellites of the set of 5. As I mentioned, the gray satellites mounted on top of that, but not visible from the camera.
Following a nominal trajectory.
3.5 minutes into flight, we've heard the call out. The trajectory is nominal. The power on the upper stage engine is good. T plus 4 minutes since that great liftoff from Vandenberg. A view from the second stage aft-facing camera. California coastline, we're headed south towards Antarctica. Now, as a reminder, the first stage is not going to be recovered, so there won't be any views from the drone ship downrange on this mission. A view from the second stage aft-facing camera. California coastline, we're headed south towards Antarctica. Now, as a reminder, the first stage is not going to be recovered, so there won't be any views from the drone ship downrange on this mission. 5 minutes into flight. Second stage engine power on the MVAC-D engine continues to look good. We're running at over 200,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space. Trajectory continues to look good. Power on the second stage from the batteries mounted on the flight. Avionics second stage engine power on the MVAC-D engine continues to look good. All systems continue to look good. We're running at over 200,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space. And the 2 Grace follow-on trajectory continues to look good. Plus 6 minutes and 4 seconds into flight. Second stage of the Falcon 9 continues to perform nominally. All systems go on Falcon 9 carrying Iridium Next and Grace follow-on. Listening to call-outs from the propulsion team, everything continues to look good for the upper stage engine. Now, as a reminder, it's 6 minutes and 45 seconds into flight. This is the first burn. That'll put us into an initial orbit, following which we will deploy the Grace satellites. We'll then have a second burn that moves us into final orbit for the deployment of the Iridium Next satellites. So stay with us after we get shut down of the engine. 7 minutes into flight. As I mentioned, we'll have 2 burns. In between will be a 42-minute coast phase between the end of burn 1 and the start of burn 2. Coming up on 8 minutes into flight since launch of Falcon 9 from Space Launch Complex 4 at Vandenberg Air Force Base. We're heading south over the Pacific Ocean, headed towards Antarctica on our first of 2 burns of the upper stage engine. Now, in order to fly an efficient trajectory for both of the payloads, we're actually now running the second stage engine at lower power. That means the burn will be longer. For folks who are used to seeing us shut down the upper stage engine 9 to 9.5 minutes into flight, today we'll actually be shutting down the engine just past T plus 10 minutes into flight. That's planned for today. The longer burn at lower power obviously takes more time, but gives us a more efficient trajectory.
Stage 2 AFTSS saved.
We're just past 9 minutes into flight. Everything continues to go well. As I said before, we're headed for Antarctica right now. We will have a coast phase once we get shut down. It'll cross over the southern polar regions and then en route east of Africa, where we will relight the engine. You might have heard a call out behind me. I think some of the employees got a glimpse of one of the other cameras, and that's nominal on the second stage, so no need to worry about the expressions that you might have heard in the background.
Vehicles in terminal guidance.
We're coming up less than 30 seconds to shutdown of the second stage engine.
Cook, LOS expected.
Tico.
We've had shutdown of the second stage engine. We're going to wait for call out on the orbit.
Nominal parking orbit insertion.
And what we like to hear on the speakers in the background, nominal parking orbit insertion. The first burn of the second stage is complete, but stay with us because in less than a minute, we're going to be coming up on separation and deployment of the two GRACE follow-on satellites. While we can't see the satellites directly from the camera, we're hoping with the wider field of view of the camera that we might catch a glimpse of one or two of them passing through the field of view as they separate away from the dispenser mounted on top of the 5 Iridium Next satellites.
GRACE payload deploy confirmed.
We have confirmation of deployment of the GRACE follow-on satellites. So we're through the first major milestone today. The first satellites have been deployed. We're now going into a coast phase with the second stage with the 5 Iridium Next satellites still attached. We're going to resume coverage of live commentary at T plus 56 minutes, just under 44 minutes from now. We'll leave you with animations and possibly live views from space as we have ground station contact. So currently, everything looking good on Falcon 9, and we'll be back coming up for the relight of the second stage engine and the deploy of the Iridium Next satellites.
Vandenberg LOS expected.
trace AFP satellites acquired by ground stations. Confirmed by customer. RC Alpha 1.
Loss of signal, troll, Antarctica. Expected. Acquisition of signal Mauritius. Acquisition of signal HPK.
Welcome back. We're T plus 56 minutes since launch. Everything continues to go well on Falcon 9. Second stage is preparing for a short relight of the upper stage engine less than 1 minute from now. Now this is going to be about an 8-second burn. That's all it's going to take to raise us from the current orbit where we successfully separated the Grace follow-on satellites into the final orbit for Iridium. Currently we're using cold gas nitrogen thrusters to keep propellant settled at the top of the turbopump on the Merlin engine. You can see there on the camera. Now we're back to animation. Currently on the night side of the Earth, so the camera view's not all that great. We're going to listen in now for ignition of the upper stage.
And back ignition. Shut down.
Ignition and shutdown of the MVAC-D engine. Waiting for guidance to confirm the orbit.
Good orbit insertion for Iridium payload deploys.
All right, that's what we wanted to hear. The guidance, navigation, and control engineer reports this is a good orbit for separation of the Iridium satellites. Now we're going to go through a phase of about 8 minutes. Another coast as the second stage prepares to deploy the satellites. We'll see the first of the 5 Iridium satellite deployments coming up, and what we'll do right now is pause commentary. We'll resume it at T plus 65 minutes, but we'll keep sending you the views of the Falcon 9 second stage with the 5 Iridium Next satellites as we get ready for separation of those satellites coming up in just about 8 minutes from now.
Loss of signal expected. Mauritius loss of signal expected. Dubai acquisition of signal.
Welcome back. John S. Parker with the webcast commentary here from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. We're just past 65 minutes since a great launch of Falcon 9. We're setting up for the first of 5 deployments of Iridium NEXT satellites. The first satellite planned to deploy in about 25 seconds from now. Currently you can see the camera on stage 2 looking at the upper stage engine. That white object you see is solid oxygen, very fluffy, lighter than a snowball. And that is normal at this stage of the flight.
First Iridium satellite payload deploy confirmed.
And a nice visual confirmation of the first of the 5 Iridium NEXT satellites being deployed off of the dispenser mounted on top of the second stage of Falcon 9. As I mentioned, we're going to do 5 deployments, 100 seconds between each deployment. So at the first one behind us, we're now 70 seconds away from the next deployment. Coming up on the second deployment in about 5 seconds from now.
Second Iridium satellite payload deploy confirmed.
Another nice view of the second Iridium satellite being deployed. That leaves 3 to go. I believe the next one is on the far side of the dispenser, so we'll only have verbal confirmation of that. I don't think we're going to see it in the camera. That'll be coming up in about 75 seconds from now. Also, as a note, while we're in the coast phase over Antarctica, the customer has confirmed their ground station in Antarctica has made contact with the GRACE follow-on satellites. So that indicates we had good separation of those satellites, and they are now talking to their ground station. In about 5 seconds, deployment of the third of the 5 Iridium Next satellites.
Third Iridium satellite, payload deploy confirmed.
Confirmation, satellite number 3 has separated. Didn't get a view of this one from the camera up on top of the second stage, but I believe the 4th one coming up, that'll be the close-up of the one that's right in the center of the field of view. Waiting for the second stage camera to switch back to a view of the Iridium satellites. There it is, coming up in 5 seconds for deployment of number 4.
Fifth Iridium satellite, payload deploy confirmed.
A nice view of Iridium deployment off of the dispenser. That'll leave us with 1 more to go out of the 5 Iridium Next satellites carried on this mission. That'll come up in 78 seconds from now. Last deployment coming up in 5 seconds.
Fifth Iridium satellite, payload deploy confirmed.
Confirmation of the 5th of all 5 Iridium Next satellites successfully deployed. And that's a clean sweep again for deployments today. And that's going to bring an end to our webcast. It's been a great Falcon 9 day here in Hawthorne and at Vandenberg Air Force Base. We had an on-time launch of Falcon 9. First stage had a great flight. We saw stage separation live on the cameras. Shortly after that, payload fairing separation. And we're following payload fairings. Both successfully deployed parachutes, but they landed in the Pacific Ocean. The fairing recovery ship, Mr. Steven, came very close, but not quite. We're going to keep working on that. But meanwhile, second stage went into a great orbit. We heard the 2 Grace follow-on satellites separate. They've already been in contact with their ground station. We then saw the relight, and just now, all 5 Iridium satellites separating every 100 seconds, just as clockwork. We'd like to thank our Iridium customer and our NASA customer, as well as the United States Air Force for range support, and our licensing agency, the Federal Aviation Administration. Please follow us on social media, on Twitter and on Instagram. Look for launch photos on our Flickr webpage, and of course at SpaceX.com. Thanks for letting us share the mission of Falcon 9 with you, and join us on our next upcoming flight out of Cape Canaveral at the end of May. With that, have a great day.